right, everybody, we are here. Can you believe we made it? 2020 is over, and we are on to 2021. So happy New Year, everybody. Excited to get on with part 2 of the episode with Danny Calloway. 3 big bucks, 1 season in 1 state, down in Maryland. 3 giant deer, 5.5, 6.5-year-old bucks. Crazy story on each one of them. Crazy good story, I should say, because there's so much input and so much information Danny shares. It's an awesome, awesome podcast, and excited to roll out episode 2. So, hope you guys enjoy, because I appreciate Danny being on the show. And also, guys, if you did not know, Huntstand has advanced trail camera management tools. And if you're not a pro user, please upgrade. Use the code TakeAim10. But if you are, this service is absolutely free to you guys. There's unique features like sync your photos in the Huntstand mobile app and view your pictures anywhere on the go. You can actually save up to 40 gigs of your trail cam photos right in the Huntstand app, which is an awesome feature. So hopefully you guys utilize it. Hopefully, as always, you guys enjoy the show. Big deer stories. That's what we do. And deer season never ends. We'll see you guys next week.
I was saying prayers. I was doing everything. And I calmed down, and, the bow hunter came back out. I'm just like, all right, when he took off running, the arrow was not flopping up and down. If it was stuck in the point of his shoulder or it hit him in the point of his shoulder, it would have been going crazy as he ran off.
Right.
It stayed in it stayed in a true line as he ran. You know how that knot, you watch that knot go through the woods.
Yeah.
And I had that lighted knot. It stayed true. It wasn't going up and down. It just followed as he went. And I got thinking, I said, well, he's quartering pretty hard. I've had this happen before. Now, I just switched up broadheads this year. I was shooting 2-inch raised trypan. I've had incidents before where you shoot a deer on a quartering angle, and your arrow will go in, and it will hit the off shoulder, and it will bounce back.
Right.
And basically the broadhead will keep that arrow from falling back out. So I'm like, maybe that's what happened. Maybe I got good penetration. Maybe, well, it's 7:38. I got pictures of this deer at 7:38 the morning before. I look at my watch, it's 7:38. I was like, geez, he's like clockwork, all this. He came in, he's right in front of the camera, literally 5 minutes before the day before. I was like, I gotta go to the hospital. I don't even have time to look for him. So I hopped down, head over to where I shot, just to peek, looking up through the woods, see if I see a lighted knot. Nothing. There's no blood. There's a kick up, and I can see his tracks. I walked 10, 15 yards, not a drop of blood. Man, I'm so sick at this point, I don't know what to do. So I walked back up to the house, hop in the car, or hop in my truck. I head to the hospital. Now, my wife was supposed to be out of there. They said it was going to be like 2.5 hours for the procedure she was having done. And I ended up sitting there until afternoon. It was like 12:30 when they called me and told me that she was ready to be released. Now, of course, with all the COVID stuff, I wasn't allowed to go sit in the waiting room and wait for her. I had to wait outside. So for this 8:30 till 12:30 period, I'm sitting out in the car, and I'm just like going insane, like living this moment over in my head, replaying it, thinking about what in the world happened. Just, was it a fatal hit? Did I mess it up? I was stressing out over it, but you usually don't get but one opportunity at a deer like this, and especially if you make contact with him and you don't find him, that's usually it. You usually don't see him. Anymore around here, you might run into him late season. Usually he'll move to another area. So 12:30 rolls in. I pick her up. I'm like rushing to get her home. She's like, I'm hungry. And I'm like, oh, yeah, there's a place on the way, I'm just trying to get home.
Right.
And so we get home, and I get her in the house, and she goes and lays in bed, and I said, look, I shot that deer this morning. I said, now I got to go look for him. And she's like, she starts sitting up in bed, and I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm going to get ready. I'm going to go help you. I was like, you can't go back there and help me look for this deer. I was like, just sit here and rest. So, I get her, make sure she's good, go back in the woods, go to where the arrow was. No blood. I mean, it had stopped raining at this point. I walk about 60 yards, and there's my arrow laying on the ground underneath of these dense hollies. I pick it up. The underside of the arrow was completely covered with blood for about, I'd say, half of the shaft still. So I knew I got good penetration. I was like, oh, man, I got good penetration.
That had to make you feel a little better, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was a sigh of relief. And no blood on the ground anywhere. I mean, even under the hollies, the ground's soaking wet. But I can see his kick up where he's been running. So I'm following kick ups. I go, literally, he runs right up the trail I found his shed antler on. I go right up the same trail, drop down into the thicket on the backside, and then he kind of turns, and now I'm in nothing but pine needles. And I don't know if you've ever been in a straight pine forest where it's nothing but pine needles, but it's like virtually impossible to spot blood, especially when it's been washed, and They don't leave a lot of tracks.
Yeah, that's super hard.
Really, you just got to look for the displacement in these needles, and you could kind of see where his toes had kind of pushed them and formed these little arrows in the pine needles. And I went about another 50, 60 yards, and I could feel my phone ringing in my pocket, and I pick it up, and it was actually my buddy Randy. He's like, hey, where's that deer at? Did you find it? And I was like, no. I was like, I'm whispering, I'm stalking. I got an arrow knock. I'm like, I got to go, man. I was like, I'm on his tracks, I think. And I like look up in front of me, and I see his rack sticking up. And it was laying flat on the ground. I know the deer is dead. And I was like, I got to go. I see him. I'm not taking any chances. So I hang the phone up, and I sneak around. And then when I get closer, I realize he's done. He's expired. And I walk up to this deer, and man, I'm going to tell you what. You get pictures of deer, and big deer. And I've killed some really great deer. I've been very fortunate. And when I walked up to this deer, man, I didn't even know what to say. It was like all this emotion had come over me that I was just like, oh my God, I've got these 3 years history with this deer that I know of. I've got 3 years history with him. He had absolutely exploded. Every trail cam picture I'd had was either rain on the lens or he was in the background. I'd never got a great look at this deer. I walk up to him and pick him up. He has got common base threes. He's got a split three on one side. He's got about a 3-inch drop on the end of his right beam. Brow tines are 5-6 inches long. And, I mean, when I say bladed, they look just like knife blades. Gnarly, stickers out of his bases, stickers off his twos. I mean, he's just a gnarly cool buck. Super massive. Couldn't even get my hands around the bases of this deer. I was beside myself. I mean, giant body, huge head, and shot placement was perfect. And it had done exactly what when I had calmed down and come to my senses about it and thought about it. The arrowhead went in, hit the bone on the off shoulder, and bounced back. Ended up, I got back of his one lung and shot through his other lung. I immediately got on the phone and called my buddy Randy back and was like, man, I got him. And he's like, FaceTime me. He gets all excited, and I FaceTime him. He's not really a technology kind of guy. It was the first time I ever FaceTimed him, and it was a little bit of a learning curve there. But, yeah, man, it was funny. He went and got his wife, who doesn't even care about deer hunting. He's like, look at this deer he shot. And his son, comes running in there. He's like, let me see it. And we're all sitting there FaceTiming over this deer. I haven't even picked his head up yet. And it was just really cool, man. And it meant so much to me, that here on my home place, a deer I had history with, a deer that I kind of, helped grow along, and he'd survived, man. He'd survived, 2 hunting clubs and a neighbor that had gotten pictures of him who'd never had a picture of him years previous. It was such a relief. But, it's like I said earlier, man, and then you look at him, you're like, man, the thrill of every time that little icon pops up on that app on my phone that I got a picture back here, it's not going to be him anymore. But
which is a bummer.
Man,
but what a deer and what history, and I mean it's a giant buck, and I mean it's a giant. Like that's a giant you'd kill anywhere in any state, which Danny does that with regularity. But man, it's such an awesome buck, and what character, and what a cool story too, because you had all that intense kind of drama for that amount of time of hunting them. You know what I mean? It's just so wild.
Yeah, and it's bow hunting's my passion, man. I actually shot a deer last year with a rifle. First deer I'd shot in 15 years with a rifle. And I'm not, to each their own. Rifle season got to be the point to me where if I saw the deer, I knew I was going to kill it unless something bad happened. If you put the crosshairs on him and you're steady and you pull the trigger, you're pretty much guaranteed a deer. He's 200-300 yards out in the field. He has no clue I'm there. I didn't have to get close. I didn't have to really beat his nose or anything like that. I just kind of set up and point and click. And not to jump on a different boat, I just, I'm sitting at home eating pizza in a hoodie and blue jeans, and my cell cam goes off, and this buck I've been after all year's in my food plot. And it's pouring rain and blowing, and I run down the street, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to get in there with my bow. And my father-in-law was like, take your son's youth gun. Just take it down there. It's rifle season. It's legal. You can do it. And I'm just like, but I don't want to do it. And I took it. I went down there, and I ended up shooting a deer at 60 yards. And just to me, I mean, I was tickled to death. It was a huge deer, probably one of the bigger deer that I've killed. And I'm not trying to take anything away from it, but I'm a bow hunter, man, and just when you get to kill a deer like this deer that we were previously talking about with the bow, that just does it for me.
Yeah, it means something for sure.
That's what I love.
Yeah,
awesome. So I've kind of been feeding and watching cameras ever since I shot that deer. I had a really, really solid buck, 8-point frame with a third main beam and some stickers. Really, he's 5.5-year-old, or he may be a little older, but I'm pretty sure he's 5.5. Had him running around. He's literally crossing the paved road every night. I get pictures of him across the road, then I'll get pictures of him on the farm he spends the summer on. And I was interested in that deer. And just a cat and mouse game with this deer, and all of a sudden, this buck that I had pictures on this summer, out where the islands are and all the crops where I always get the bachelor groups, this deer that I had pictures of out there that I was so interested in this past summer shows up across the road on that camera. And now this is, like I said, this is probably 2.5 miles from where that deer was during the summer. I get pictures of him at like 9 o'clock at night, and about 20 minutes before light, I get pictures of him on the other farm across 2 paved roads the next morning on another camera. I was like rubbing my eyes. I was like, man, is he moving that much? I mean, it's the rut, but
right, that's pretty crazy.
He's crossing some prime land full of a lot of does to be doing that much traveling. The next night, I get a picture of him in the swamp. It's a flooded swamp. This is right across the road from where I had pictures of him during the summer. I called him, and I usually don't name deer. I called this buck the caribou buck because of his third main beam that came out and hooked up. He kind of looked more like an elk's growl, but his high rack and the way it kind of canted up on an angle, and that third main beam, he just kind of looked like a caribou's rack from the side, so I just called him the caribou buck for some reason. Had pictures of him in the swamp. He was there that evening about probably 30 minutes after dark. He'd come by and he checked that he was working a scrape. And an hour and a half later, he was 2 miles down the road on another piece of woods, walking by a camera that I had on a scrape. I'm like, this guy's just got wheels on his feet. He ended up disappearing. After all these camera sightings in November, he disappeared. And usually this woods I hunt, this swamp I call, it's a big, basically it's a holly woods. It's full of nothing but those gigantic hollies I was telling you about earlier. And not any, there's like a couple oak trees in there, nothing really, they basically got, it's a wet wood that you navigate carefully with knee boots on because of the water depth. And the only place where there's high ground is where a tree's coming up. It's like a mound around each tree. So there was a spot in there that a tree had blown over years past, and the stump had rotted and the dirt had settled out, and it makes a pretty good high spot. So I go in this swamp and I'll pretty much feed the deer on that spot. And I started running the cell cam in there, and after about probably 2.5 weeks of running cameras in there, he shows up on camera. And this is a deer from day one that when he showed up in the velvet across the road, I knew I don't have a lot of history with this deer. I may have pictures of him from prior seasons, but I've not put the puzzle pieces together. Normally I'll know a deer, but this deer I didn't know him. I ended up just watching that spot, closely, keeping it. If the corn run low, or if we were having dry weather to where I could put some pellets in there, I kept the place, kept them fat and happy, and he started coming more on a regular basis, and I'm working, and I got cell cam in there, and it's going off 2:30 in the afternoon, and he's in there eating corn, and I get off work, and I rush to go in there to hunt the last couple hours of light, and, he's already been there, filled his belly, he's gone. So I couldn't quite catch up with this deer. So this goes on for, several weeks, and, we're rolling, into Christmas and now the New Year, and, you can be the guy that sits around and just wait for them to come to you, and I'm guilty of that a lot, and I'm guilty of letting a camera tell me the story when a camera only shows you what's in front of it, and that'll ruin a lot of really good deer hunters, and I've let it ruin me several times. But
yeah, I've been spoiled once or twice by it too, and it's an easy mistake, to make, and I'm glad you're bringing that up, Danny.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've had multiple experiences with the same thing. You could have a big buck on a farm, and he could be walking behind the camera, beside the camera, nowhere near the camera, but just because that camera doesn't show you that he's there does not mean that deer's not there.
Right.
And I've got buddies who are great deer hunters that kill big deer, and they will not go. And they'll say it. They say it to me all the time. I'm not going until I get that deer on camera. When he starts showing up consistently on camera, that's when I'll go hunting. And I said, by that time, the reason he's there might not be there anymore, and you missed out. So I would rather be in the stand the first time that deer walks by it than the 5th time, because I know he's been coming through there. I would just, you get one opportunity, and if you're not hunting the spot just because he's not on camera, you might be missing that opportunity. So I don't really let the cameras dictate me I mean, like I said, I'm guilty of it because I've let it happen. But when I get smart, I don't let the cameras dictate, whether I'm going to hunt a spot or not. So, now that being said, I'm getting this deer 2 or 3 times a week. I'm getting him almost every night, 2 or 3. He's coming back feeding on this spot 2 or 3 times a night, during after hours. So, finally I said, muzzleloader, we got a 2-week muzzleloader season that's in right now. It actually ends Saturday. And then we've got a 3-day rifle. It's like the 8th, 9th, and 10th of January. So I don't have a buck tag after this muzzleload season and after that 3-day season. So all of the late bow season that I love to hunt, I won't be able to go and hunt any, big mature deer. I won't be able to hunt any bucks. I can't tag them. I won't have a tag. So
right.
It was either, it was time to make a move and figure out something else, or eat a tag, which
right.
That's fine. But everybody, if I had, we used to be allowed to have 4. We had 4 buck tags, and some years I would fill all 4 tags, and it's just if you got them, I'm hunting, man. I mean, I love it. That's what I live for. So I figured out and devised a plan. I said, all right, this deer's on camera just before light, just after dark, a couple evenings. He's there right before dark, right after dark. In the mornings, he's never really there during light. So he's leaving in time that he can travel to wherever he's going and be to wherever he's going to bid before the sun's up. In the evenings, he's on his feet, and he's coming in there and he's getting himself something to eat before he goes out for the night, and then he comes back 2 or 3 times. So it's feeding in the general area. Got a lot of pressure behind this farm. I got a lot of pressure to the to probably the north and south of it, and one side is road frontage. So I'm pretty sure he's traveling in my piece. I've got probably I don't want to really call it CRP or CREP, or we just let the fields grow up this year. So we've got like about
natural grass
chest high. Yep, natural growth. And normally I put a food plot in this place, and this year I went out and worked the land and put some seed out. We got so much rain it drowned it out, so it was very unsuccessful on that part. But I noticed when I would leave the woods, because this woods is so dense with hollies and so thick, you can't see to shoot. And you climb down, and by the time you walk out to your truck and you get to the truck and you're out there where it's open, you can probably hunt another 10, 15 minutes.
Right.
I mean, it's that much more light. So I would leave, and when I was leaving, I would look down the field that butts up to my woods, and there'd be 10, 15 deer out in the field. So it was a strip of it was a cornfield, probably about 350 yards deep by 100 yards wide. And my grass field butted up to it, and I basically have all 3 sides around this cornfield, but the cornfield's not mine. So I went out last Saturday, and I took one of my cell cams, and I went out there and I put it aiming toward the point about 65 yards from the point of that woods where they would come out of the grass and go into the cornfield. First evening the camera's up, I get a picture of this really wide old 6-pointer that I got pictures of. And he's usually not far behind this other deer. Got a bunch of does, some small bucks, no pictures of him. A day or two later, I get a picture about 15, 20 minutes before dark. I mean, it would have been impossible probably to see in the woods, but out in the field, it's good enough light. And I got a picture of this deer working that point, coming around that point out of the grass and into the cornfield. And then my other cellular camera that was in the woods where I was baiting, he was on it about 20 minutes later. And that's about the time it would take him to travel from that point to that corn pile. So I said, all right, there's a piece of the puzzle. He's creeping through this, this crepe field, this grown-up grass field, and he's using it as cover. And instead of going through this wet swamp and mucking and splashing, he's cutting across the back corner of this cornfield, and he's making his way in through that woods, 150 yards in deep into that woods, and he's eating on that corn pile. Totally not what I thought this deer was doing, just on a hunch, I just threw a camera up and, observation, see what I see.
And just by chance that happened.
Just by chance, he walked by and tripped the camera off, and he's walking kind of quartered away in the image, but unmistakably I knew it was that deer. So I had to stand right on that point, like 2 trees off the edge of the ditch on that point that I'd set back in August when I had worked that food plot. It was going to be a great spot to set up for northwest winds. And I'm sitting at work, and I'm looking at my phone, and it's, I really want to hunt that stand. I'm like, I just want to see. You can see everything from out of this tree. You got so many fields to look over. And I'm looking, and I'm just like, man, southwest wind. I was like, God, that's blowing right across the corner of that cornfield into the woods where my bait pile is. I said, every deer that's in that woods is gonna be downwind of me. Every deer that comes out of that woods is going to be downwind of me. But where I think he's coming from, the wind's in favor for me. So most people that I know wouldn't have hunted that stand. They'd have said, nah, my wind's blowing across the cornfield. There's going to be 15 deer out in that field a half hour before dark. I'm going to get busted. I'm not going to try it. It's not worth it. Me, I'm like, I'm going to climb this tree. I'm going to spray down from head to toe with my carbon synergy, and I'm going to be in for a ride for the evening. So that's what I did. And it was probably about 4:45. I had the 6-year-old 6-point downwind of me in the cornfield with he probably had 7 or 8 does with him. I had a doe and her 2 yearling fawns walk straight up the edge under my stand and out into the grass field, the crepe field in front of me. And I hear a muzzleloader shot across the grass field into the pine woods, not far in the pine woods. And there's an older, retired gentleman who hunts all that, and he's got crop damage permits. He's shooting 24 hours a day. The guy just goes back there and
shoot stuff.
He's back there every morning. Every evening, yeah. Every time I hunt there, he's dragging a doe behind his 4-wheeler or a little buck or something. Like he's if you're trying to grow big deer and you want to have trophy deer to hunt, he is the worst neighbor for you. So I hear him shoot. I'm sure it's him, and I catch something out the corner of my eye, and I look, and about 400 yards away from the angle of where the shot come from, here comes this buck trotting through the grass, heading straight for this point. He runs about 250 yards. He gets to the first ditch in the field, and he turns around and he stops, and he stares back in the direction of the shot. Now, I don't know if he was in the woods over there and the guy shot at him and missed him, or if he shot a doe that was coming in front of his stand before this deer ever got there, but something spooked that deer. So he stood there, and, for a minute, he stared back in that direction. And finally, he went down through the ditch and come into the second grass field. He trotted across the second grass field, and he got to the last ditch that is the last field between me and him. He crosses the ditch. He takes off like somebody had whipped him across his tail end, and he starts digging across that field and heading to where he's going to be way out of bow range for me. And all of a sudden, he locks up and just stops and stares out into this cut cornfield at all these deer out there. And I don't know what possessed him to do it. He whips back around and runs back for the woods that he ran from. And he gets back to that ditch to where I had a bush hog path that I had actually bush hogged a path to channel deer by the stand. And he gets in that bush hog path and he makes a hard turn and starts walking straight down the bush hog path to the base of my tree. He's coming. I range him 72 yards, 60 yards. All of a sudden, 3 does bust out of that same woods where he came from, and he stops and he turns broadside and looks off in that direction, watching them come across the field. I assume somebody's over in that woods and they blew these
moving
deer
around. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sitting there and going, he has ran literally 300 yards plus across this field. Not once has he walked anywhere. I can take a risk and see if he's going to walk by this point, and I can shoot him before he gets in this guy's cornfield. Or I can go ahead and take my shot now. He's broadside. He's 40 yards. I'm confident, well beyond 40 yards. He's kind of on pins and needles a little bit, you know. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take the shot. So I hit him with the rangefinder again. He's watching these does running across the field. They're coming right to him. I come to full draw, settle my pin right behind his shoulder. I shot, and probably about to where that arrow looks like it's in line with your eye when it's just about to hit him, he drops about 8 inches to turn and wheel away from that arrow. And I hit him a little high. I hit him below the spine, but I was shooting that 2-inch expandable broadhead. I don't know. I must have clipped something. He fell over like I'd shot him with a rifle. And he immediately, you know, a spine shot to me, you know, it definitely puts him down, but I don't like to see him sit there and suffer. And so I immediately grabbed another arrow. You know, he was still moving around, and I shot it from the stand, you know, and put another arrow in him, which that arrow would hit him, you know, perfect into the chest cavity. And I climbed down and walked over, you know, and I've only had trail cam pictures of this deer, and I knew he was an old deer. I knew he was thick and palmated on that one side, and you know, it's after the shot now. I'm shaking like it's -30 outside. I'm like freezing to death, but I just got those involuntary shivers, you know. I'm so pumped up. And I walk over to this deer, and what's that? I'm sorry.
I said the good shivers.
Yeah, the good ones. So I walk over, and you know, I grab him by his horns, and I pick his head up, and I could not believe the mass and the formation on that one side. It was like he had grown 2 different racks. One side was just a normal average mass 4-point side, and then he had this, you know, sweeping beam with these bladed points, and this, I mean, you couldn't even get your fingers around the mass between his base and his tooth. Man, I was tickled to death. And, you know, it's plenty of daylight out, so I march over, get my truck, and as I get my truck and I start to drive, here comes a guy out of that corner of the field on a side-by-side where he had run from. So I'm pretty sure that guy had run him out of the woods.
No kidding.
Yeah, we ended up meeting on the road, and it's that old retired fellow, and he probably shot something or shot at something, I'm sure, but we didn't exchange words. He kind of pulled into his house, and I went on around, and I thought it was pretty cool. I backed up to the deer, and I had my backup camera. You know, I pulled right out there to him, and I thought it was pretty cool. I had a little image of him in the backup camera, so I snapped a picture of that, and basically got out and hossed him up in the truck myself and took him home. And yeah, man, it's you know, you get, I'm not one to spend like 15-20 minutes out in the woods, and even when I shot a deer on video, I hate to be in the woods talking, making noise. You know, everybody's seen TV shows and they're hooping and hollering and fist pumping and screaming, and they give a 20-minute interview of this, that. I didn't like doing that, and a lot of times I would get my deer away from wherever when I was videoing, because I just want to I want to clear the area. I want the other deer to be able to start moving and being normal and not disrupt their pattern. Keep it as calm and as normal as possible. So until I got him back home, I slid him out on the tailgate, and I was like, man, I couldn't get. I was like, look at the face on this guy. I mean, he had a big old block triangle head. I mean, I would not say the deer is any younger than 6, and I'm usually pretty close on age. I've been bow hunting since I was 11 years old, and it's primarily what I've been doing, for my entire life of hunting is bow hunting. And you're closer to deer, you learn about deer, you learn characteristics of deer, all the reads of being able to look at deer, the telltale signs of age. And, I was just, whenever I kill a deer like that, man, it's like the most rewarding part of hunting is when you get to harvest a deer of that age class to me. I mean, I killed bucks earlier in the years that were 3 years. It used to be my motto, if he's 3, he's a shooter, And then as time goes by, you set a higher goal for yourself. And I kind of got to the point where, 4-year-olds, now I'm like, he's 4, he looks good, but, I'm going to let him go. I want to let him go another year. And that's kind of what I do now. I've had a deer that were 140, 150-inch 4-year-olds on camera daily. And I would literally go 10 miles down the road to hunt a 120-inch deer that I knew was 6+ in age. And people were like, man, you're crazy. And I was like, dude, these are the ones that get my, everybody wants to kill a big buck.
Right.
But man, that's the ones that really get, I don't care if it's over a bait pile. A lot of people, we're allowed to bait in Maryland, and I do bait. I bait a lot of my spots. If anybody watched any of my hunts on when they were televised, you'll notice that a lot of my hunts are actually over a baited area. And we have very small tracts of land around here, very, very heavily, really dense population of hunters around here, I would say. There's not a block of woods that's not being hunted or somebody's hunting in it. Deer see corn piles every woods they walk in.
Right. Sounds like Michigan, Danny. It's exactly.
Oh, I'm sure,
Yeah. I got small woodlots, tons of pressure, and what you said about a 3.5-year-old rings true. Like, for most of us here in Michigan, that's our management plan, because we don't have the buck to doe ratio right. It's like one. I mean, I'm not even exaggerating. In my area, maybe 1 for every 40 does is a buck. It's crazy.
Right.
And it might be 30, but it's way up there. So we just don't have, with the amount of hunting pressure, we don't have older deer. So that's my goal every year. Is like, man, if you shoot a 3.5-year-old or older, you're doing something right in Michigan. But I'm just with you on how hard it is with or without bait.
Yeah, and then a lot of people. I've even I've read people, the nature of people. There's states where people can't bait, and I'll tell you, I've hunted in the Midwest, and terrain dictates a lot of deer movement.
That's right.
You've got fingers, ridges, valleys, you whatever you want to call it. And that's where the deer move. Here, we're flat.
Same as here,
or
at least my section.
Yeah, you can. You can see for miles if there was not a tree. Which a lot of places we have more tillable land where we hunt than we do actually acreage timber.
Right.
And a deer go anywhere he wants around here. Hunting trails. You can set up on trails if it's like a pinch point area where you got like a creek and a bunch of felled trees, and it's definitely funneling the deer through it. Set up on a trail. You'll probably have really good luck. But if you go out and hang your stand on some good trails, you're probably going to be sitting there a while before you see a good buck, because he usually doesn't walk those trails. He's usually making his own way, and they just don't follow trails here that like people think, you know.
Yeah, another takeaway from this episode, Danny, and you've said this multiple times with each one of those bucks, it seemed like, and that was those field edges. You weren't really getting, deer on those big mature bucks on cameras. They were always in the background and always in the thicket, and that is, like, to a T, one of the things I do now in Michigan is you're almost wasting your time on an evening setting a field edge, because they're just not, like you said, they don't come out in the open. There's just a big difference when a deer hits 3, 4, and 5 years old in these pressured states. They don't come out and show themselves in the open. They just don't. Even with the cameras. I didn't do any of my cameras this year on a field edge, besides one over a scrape kind of in an inside corner. But besides that, you wouldn't believe some of the big bucks I got this year on Michigan, just changing that this year alone. It was crazy.
Oh, yeah. For an example, I've got a farm, and I put a camera facing out into the field. It was the inside corner of the field. I put a camera facing out into the field, and I put a camera facing on that inside corner. And the camera, they were both cell cams. The camera facing out in the field, I got a ton of deer on. I got does, I got small bucks. The camera facing into the woods just on the other side of that tree, I had more shooter bucks on that camera than I ever saw on that field in 3 years in one season. In one season, that camera showed me more bucks than I'd seen on that entire field in 3 seasons. They weren't coming out in there. I mean, they knew if they come out there, there's a good chance somebody was going to take a crack at them. A lot of guys around here, that's the bad part about baiting around here too, is everybody's doing it. I go in a certain day of the week, which is usually on the weekend because I have work, and I try to go around the same time every week. And I go in, I wear scent-free rubber boots, I put it out, I leave. I have cell cams. I don't have to go in there and check the card every few days. It sends me the image. And when that place gets low, I'll go back in that same time frame. If it's a day or two early, it happens. But I don't go anywhere near the times that you would possibly see deer in those areas. They're usually here, they're first hour late, last hour late. That's pretty much year-round besides the summer months because of the pressure and the risk of going. But, you get a lot of guys that they'll tell you, they'll say, well, you hunt a corn pile. That's not hunting. Well, okay, you're setting up a tree stand on an oak ridge overlooking some trails, right? Those bucks are going to come down those trails. They're going to walk through the woods, meander. They're just passing through. You're catching deer passing through. A guy sitting on a corn pile, that deer knows he wants to go to that corn pile. All the deer in the area know they want to go to that corn pile. So they all approach it from downwind. They circle it downwind. They'll circle. We've had deer that actually broke cover to go out into a bean field and circle a corn pile 100, 150 yards out before he would approach it because he wanted to check the wind. And, it could go either way, but when you're setting over a corn pile, everything knows that when they go there, that there's a good chance they're going to get shot at. So those deer have to approach it with the wind in their favor. If the wind's not in their favor, they will change their pattern and approach it with the wind in their favor. A lot of guys get busted hunting over corn piles. A lot of guys don't see big deer over corn piles. And you got this group of guys that's like, you can't kill big deer over corn pile. They're too smart. No, they're too smart for you because you just got off work and you just went and jumped in a tree stand and you got grease on your hands and you smell like McDonald's. And he circled the wind 150 yards where you couldn't see him.
And got you.
And he never came there.
That's right.
So be there like you've never been there is how I like to go in the woods. I don't cut paths. I don't beat down roads. I don't use four-wheelers. I got the worst knees around because I've been lugging 100 pounds of corn on my back through the nastiest swamps you could ever walk through for years. And all just so I can, get that one opportunity.
That's right. Which you do, Danny, but it's all about work, and that's what this whole podcast was the effort and, a lot of great tips that you just gave us, man, that I'm actually going to have to go back and just kind of re-listen to this. And when I do the editing, because there's a lot that you just put in, but, that last buck you just killed, man, it was just an awesome story and just crazy how that worked out. And, us talking about it almost doesn't do it pictures. I can't wait for, kind of share that media art because that buck is so unique and so cool. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm sitting here right now as we've been having this conversation, and this is the third guy that has sent me pictures of that deer I killed yesterday.
No kidding.
Yeah, a guy just sent me pictures right now. He just says, "Congratulations, old Captain Hook has fallen." So they called him Captain Hook.
That's cool. Wow.
So 3 guys have sent me pictures of this buck that hunt somewhere in the vicinity. I know where this guy hunts. He's 2 properties behind me. But, yeah. So it just goes to show you, they get around.
They do, man.
They get around.
That's amazing. Yeah, sometimes, we talk a lot about older deer and how they, Danny, you hear it a lot. They shrink that core area. And there's places like where you live and I live where we don't have all that cover and tons of timber. And it seems like to me I'm learning more and more that some of these deer have a lot bigger home range and way more bedding areas than I ever would have thought. And it's just crazy, but it's all, and you mentioned earlier, it's all where you hunt and a train. If we had different topography like they do in some of the Midwest, like Missouri and Illinois, where there's bottoms and stuff like that, I could see deer not moving as much. I don't have that, either do you, and it's super flat. So, just as crazy that some of the deer, how many people, end up getting pictures or hunting the same deer you're hunting, which it blows your mind because it's just so much pressure. And like you said, they've survived that and lived through that for 6-7 years old. And kudos to you again, Danny, because that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. It just, it's anybody's game. It's just what you make of it. Any of these guys that have pictures, the guy that just sent me a picture now, it's a daylight picture. I'm no, I try to get a strategy together. I try to do a minimal impact, and it pays off. Is all. You can be the best hunter in the world, but if you don't have the deer, you're not going to kill them for one. And if you're not willing to take risks and make moves and, push the envelope, you're going to have a lot of seasons where you're not going to connect on some of these older, bigger bucks.
Yeah, I think that's very true, and wise words, man. And that's, one thing I always try to do is low impact, and it seems like every year now, maybe it's age or just the knowing more, but I am pushing the envelope, a little more every single year from what I've been comfortable with, because I've always been so low pressure, and maybe you have too in the past, Danny, that it almost hurts you. You know what I mean? And so now I'm pushing that pace a lot more because I do know, what I can get away with and what I can't. And some of that is knowing properties year in and year out. And it sounds like you obviously know what you're doing in your properties, but that's another, as we end this podcast, another great takeaway from the show, to the listeners is, keep pace with that low impact, don't go crazy. So many guys do what you're saying, Danny, at 4-wheeler trails, and they just make it too accessible, or they clean out all the eye level, brush, and and all the stuff that they browse on, and you take away that bedding and that thick stuff, and man, it's just a detriment to properties. It pushes deer out like crazy. So it just, there's so many steps to it. It's crazy, but you know, it's neat when you finally get to put it all together and you're finally getting it to be a well-oiled machine. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, and it's like you said, if the way I see it, you know, a lot of guys, they look at the woods as like, oh man, this is a beautiful spot. I would love to have that deer walk right through here, and this is where I'd love to kill him. This spot is perfect. Well, a lot of guys don't realize that, you know, the whitetails world is about from your shoulder down, and what's wide open and pretty to you is a red flag for him not to travel through that area. You know, he likes cover. If I can stand in a hunting spot and I can see, you know, more than 30, 40 yards, and it's wide open and beyond that, man, if there's any, like, trash trees in there, like we got a ton of hollies and gums around here, they have no market value. They have no value as far as their lumber itself or timber. Man, I'll hinge cut them. I'll hinge cut them in a heartbeat, and you would be surprised at the way the deer hug these as they come through this woods, and just the relaxed, just how much more relaxed they are as they do so. It just changes the perception. It just changes the game. I mean, so such a big change.
Yeah, it is such a big change. Yep. And you know, another thing, I mean, you alluded to this, but what it does is it actually creates more daylight movement versus having a forest floor that's wide open. You know, that's when it becomes basically essentially a field edge, is when you can see through a woodlot 10, 15 acres. The deer just don't feel comfortable. So you're just helping yourself. You're helping that natural daylight movement. You know, when they get up and kind of want to change beds or just change with the wind direction just a little bit, you get to see a lot more when, you know, it's thick and nasty. And a lot of guys just don't like that. But that's reality if you want to kill big deer. And Danny does that every year. So it's definitely another great takeaway. So, but Danny, I know we've been on way longer than, you know, I told you we would be. But, man, thanks for, you know, 3 awesome stories and your time today and just all the great information, man. I really appreciate it. And what a way for you to end the year, man, literally the day before New Year's Eve, and to shoot just a remarkable buck, really a buck of a lifetime, and you did that, you know, a couple times this year. So, man, amazing season, and couldn't be more pumped for you.
I appreciate it, man. I really appreciate you having me on. I know I get a little long-winded in my story sometimes, but I'm just a guy for detail.
A lot of great details, man. I appreciate that as well, and it's great that you remember all those details. And you know, obviously, Danny, man, I hope we do it again, and I can't wait to see what you get into next year.
Anytime, man. Anytime. I appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. And as you guys know, the season never ends, like Danny said in the podcast, and I'm a big believer in that. So get ready for next year. It's here. And as you guys know, every week you can find us on iTunes. Make sure to leave us a 5-star rating, and Amazon Music, Unfiltered Outdoor app.